Daniel 7 is considered by some to be the most important chapter in the book of Daniel. Others even consider it the most important chapter in the entire Old Testament for reasons that we will get into later. But certainly one of those reasons is because of its prophetic significance. In Daniel chapter 7, Daniel has a vision of 4 beasts: a lion, bear, leopard, and a, quote, diverse beast. These beasts are identified as kings or kingdoms by the angel who interprets Daniel's dream, starting in verse 17. The question is, which kingdoms are being referred to with these beasts? Most conservatives believe that Daniel chapter 7 is simply a retelling of Daniel chapter 2. In other words, the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had in Daniel chapter 2 of a multi-metal statue, which represented the 4 kingdoms of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, are again described here in Daniel 7. I don't agree with that view, but I do agree with them that the 4th beast in Daniel chapter 7 is the kingdom of Antichrist. However, because of their insistence that this chapter, Daniel 7, is simply a mirror image of Daniel chapter 2, they are forced to defend the position that the Antichrist must somehow come from something they call the revived Roman Empire. Because in Daniel chapter 2, the last section of the statue is clearly talking about Rome. So if this chapter is the same as that one, then the 4th beast in Daniel 7 is also Rome. I will be attempting to demonstrate to you that not only is that view wrong and not necessary or implied by Scripture, it could cause many people to miss the signs of Antichrist's kingdom from a geopolitical perspective. For more information on why the belief of the revived Roman Empire is based on a bad exegesis of Daniel chapter 2, please see my video or audio on Daniel 2, which should be linked in the notes. I would also recommend a 4-part paper by Charles Cooper, who is a former professor of hermeneutics at Moody Bible Institute. That paper is called Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, Equal or Not Equal. In the traditional view, the beasts of Daniel chapter 7 are succeeded in time by the next beast. For example, the lion, the first beast, who they say represents Babylon, would be followed after much time by the bear, the second beast, who they say represents Medo-Persia, since Babylon was conquered by Medo-Persia. And then the leopard, the third beast, who they say represents Greece, would conquer the bear after that, and so on. I believe there are significant reasons to challenge this view of the kingdoms being in temporal succession of one another. In other words, to challenge the idea that these beasts in Daniel chapter 7 existed one after the other instead of all at the same time. In this study, I will propose that this vision of the 4 beasts in Daniel 7 is not simply a picture of 4 kingdoms that have come and gone in the past, but rather this is a picture of the 4 kingdoms that will be on the earth at the same time when the Antichrist begins his reign. If this is the case, then this chapter, along with the latter half of Daniel 11 and Revelation 13, give the church its best chance to recognize the geopolitical precursors to the rise of Antichrist. A large number of reasons for viewing these beasts as contemporaneous as opposed to successive will be presented in this study, but I will mention a few notable ones quickly so that you can get an idea of the types of problems that the traditional view has. Daniel 7:11 through 12 describe the Antichrist who is thrown into the lake of fire after his reign is completed. Very few conservatives would debate this point. However, after he's thrown into the lake of fire, the mentioning of the previous 3 beasts show that they are still around at that time. In fact, it says specifically that they are allowed to live on after that. It says, "I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time." In what sense can Neo-Babylonia or Medo-Persia be spoken of as living on after the Antichrist is destroyed? Traditional scholars give no compelling explanations for these beasts or kingdoms' presence and prolonging of their life at this point. I will show you why the contemporaneous view explains this verse with many confirmations from Scripture. Additionally, there are several grammatical and contextual indications that make it plain that these kingdoms exist at the same time in history. I will also be showing how not only does the traditional view contain no explicit evidence, the evidence it does present is often inconsistent and wrong. The following then is an overview of the key points that we will find in this vision as understood by what I will call the contemporaneous beast view. There is a dividing of the world into 4 parts in the time just prior to the Antichrist beginning his rule. The Antichrist eventually takes control of one of those 4 kingdoms, which has 10 rulers. He eventually conquers all 4 kingdoms through war and effectively rules the entire world in a new amalgamated kingdom, as seen in Revelation 13, 1 through 2. Antichrist's initial ruling of only a 4th part of the earth is perhaps why in Revelation 6:8 power is given to death and Hades over only a 4th part of the earth. This point is especially important if one understands that Revelation 6 may be one of the most complete descriptions of Antichrist's torment of people before the wrath of God begins. In other words, Revelation 6 would be the perfect place to describe the Antichrist dominion as only covering a 4th of the earth, even though he will eventually subdue all the other 3 kingdoms and control the entire world system, which brings me to my next point. The contemporaneous beast view suggests that Daniel chapter 11, 36 and following essentially links Daniel chapter 7 with Revelation 13. Let me explain what I mean by all that, and it may take me a minute to do so, so bear with me. Daniel chapter 11 verses 36 through 45 describe how the Antichrist will be conquering all kinds of lands and kingdoms through warfare. Then, later on at some point, he will declare himself to be higher than God in the holy place in Jerusalem. At that point, what's sometimes called the abomination of desolation, it will signify the last 3.5 years of his reign. But before that, in the first 3.5 years, he is busy making war. He's conquering all kinds of kingdoms and establishing his domain. Here is a sampling of the Antichrist's military career during that first 3.5 years as told in Daniel 11, verses 36 through 45. It says, "Thus he shall act against the strongest fortresses with a foreign god, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and divide the land for gain. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. But news from the east and the north shall trouble him, therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many." All this is perhaps why the book of Revelation says that one of the reasons that the world marvels at the Antichrist is because of his war-making capability. They say of him in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 13:4, "So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?'" Now, continuing and trying to explain what I mean, that the verses that we just read about the military career of Antichrist actually connect Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, we need to talk about Revelation 13. Revelation 13 is arguably the chapter that gives us the most detail about the Antichrist. And that chapter starts out this way. It says, "Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him its power, his throne, and great authority." This symbolic representation of Antichrist by John in Revelation 13 is a direct reference to our chapter in Daniel 7. The fact that we have a lion, bear, and a leopard all in the same place, and in the context of the Antichrist, is enough to pay attention. But when you see that it has 7 heads and 10 horns, a direct correlation to Daniel 7, the possibility of this being a coincidental similarity is not a reasonable option. Let me show you why this is significant. If you take the beast way back in Daniel 7, that is, a lion with wings, a bear, a 4-headed leopard, and a 10-horned beast, and you squeeze them all together, if you combine them all into one beast, you would have a 7-headed, 10-horned beast with the characteristics of a bear, leopard, and a lion. Exactly what we see in Revelation 13. In other words, I'm proposing to you that what you are looking at in the first few verses of Revelation 13, when a 7-headed, 10-horned lion, leopard, bear, beast comes out of the sea, is that it's the Antichrist now done with his conquests of the other 3 world powers, and is now the uncontested ruler of the world emerging. Revelation 13 is understood by most conservatives to be the Antichrist's final 3.5 years, not his first 3.5 years. So back to what I said earlier. The view that I will be promoting, the contemporaneous beast view of Daniel 7, suggests that Daniel chapter 11, 36 through 45, which describes the wars of Antichrist in the first 3.5 years, essentially links Daniel chapter 7, the Antichrist pre-wars, where he is only one of 4 powers, with Revelation 13, where he is the uncontested ruler of all world powers. So these 3 chapters sprout out all over the Bible, more or less provide a before, during, and after conquest snapshot of the Antichrist. To say it another way, here in Daniel 7, it gives us details on what to look for in the world just prior to and during the beginning of Antichrist's ascent to power. Daniel 11, 36 through 45 gives us what his conquests of the other powers will look like, and Revelation 13 tells us what it will look like once he has gained complete control. I will now begin to do a verse-by-verse exposition of this chapter. If you would like to read this or see it in video or hear it just in audio, you can go to the website versebyversebibleteaching.com,